Hello everybody, my name is Grace and today I'm going to read Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. Chapter 2, The Secret School. Rested and older now, Maria was eager to start college, but there was only enough money in the family for one student at a time. Her brother Joseph was already in medical school. Maria and her sisters would have to wait their turns. Besides, Warsaw's university didn't let girls in. For the next year, Maria decided to study on her own. She longed to be a scientist like her father. How would she ever learn science without teachers and laboratories and classrooms? Luckily, there was a clever woman who could help. The woman's name was Jagwiwa Dawidawa. Jagwiga knew that many young Polish women wanted to study, even if it meant risking punishment and breaking the Russian rules. Jagwiga started a secret university. At first, the classes were taught in private homes. The smartest scientists and writers in Warsaw volunteered to teach. Later, Jagwiga moved to the classes to bigger buildings. The classes had to keep moving, flying from place to place, so the Russian police wouldn't find out. Soon it became known as the Flying University. Maria and her sister Bronia took classes at the Flying University. Still, they both dreamed of attending a real university someday. But where? The best choice was Sorbonne, a famous university in Paris, France. It's probably the best school in Europe, and it accepted women. Maria and Bronia came up with a plan. They would take turns. Bronia would go to Paris first to study. Maria would stay in Poland to earn money for them both. After Bronia graduated from the Sorbonne, it would be Maria's turn. Maria took a job as a governess. At the age of 18, she left her beloved father and home behind to live with a rich family in the countryside. Her job as governess was to teach the children in the family. One of her students was a girl a year older than Maria. At first, Maria liked the job. She had her own big room. There was plenty of food, and the parents were kind to her. They invited her to parties and treated her almost like a real member of the family. In her free time, she read math and science books. One day, something happened that changed everything. Maria met the oldest son in the family. His name was Kazimierz, or Kaz for short. Maria and Kaz fell in love, but when his family found out, they forbade him to marry her. Why? Because she was only a governess. Even though she was smart, educated, and had good manners, they thought she was more like a servant. She wasn't good enough to marry their son. From that moment on, Maria was miserable. She hated living and working for people who looked down on her. But she had to keep her pledge to Bronia. For another year or more, she kept the job, hating it all the time. After that, Maria worked as a governess for another family. Then she returned home to study at the Flying University again. Finally, her sister Bronia wrote to her from Paris. Bronia had finished her schooling and had married a man who happened to have the same name as Maria's old boyfriend, Kazimierz. Bronia and her cast invited Maria to come live with them so she could ascend the Sorbonne. In 1891, Maria boarded a train for Paris. When she arrived, she would begin to use a new name, Marie. It was the French version of Maria. A whole life was going to begin. Chapter 3. Hungry but Happy. The trip to Paris took 3 days. Mary couldn't pay for a seat. She rode the whole way on a stool that she brought with her. The train car was so cold she kept herself wrapped in blankets. She barely had enough food to eat during the trip. It was the first of many hardships that would be soon a part of her everyday life. Marie didn't care though. She was happy to be fulfilling her dream. The Sorbonne was such a different kind of place. There was almost no rules. She could take whatever class she needed, she wanted. She didn't have to attend class if she didn't feel like it. She could even choose whether or not to take tests. Best of all, the tuition was free. Living with Brunia was not so much fun though. Brunia and Cass were both doctors. The patients came to their apartment for treatment. The house was always crowded and noisy. Marie's trip to the Sorbonne every day was a long one. She had to ride in the cold on the top deck of an open bus, an hour each way. After 6 months, Marie moved out and rented her own place closer to the Sorbonne. Her apartment was a tiny single room on the top floor of an apartment building. She had no kitchen, so she did all her cooking over an alcohol lamp. Her meals were skimpy, just bread with maybe a hot cup of chocolate, an egg, or fruit. One time, Mary was so hungry that she fainted while studying in the library. In winter, her room was so cold that water would freeze in the bowl. If she wanted heat, she had to buy coal and carry it up 6 flights of stairs. She couldn't always afford coal, but most of the time she slept with her clothes piled up on her to keep warm. It was a very hard time for a woman to live alone in Paris. Very few women went to college. When Marie entered the science department at Sorbonne, there were 1,825 students, but only 23 of them were women. There were so few women studying in France that the French didn't have a word for female students. The only word they meant girlfriend of a student. Marie spoke French, not very well at first. She had to work hard to understand French people and make sure she pronounced the words correctly. Still, Marie was happy. Years later, she called it one of the best memories of her life. She loved her classes. She spent every waking minute studying. She didn't care about anything except science, and she was being taught by some of the most famous scientists of all Europe. One of her professors, Gabriel Lippmann, would later win a Nobel Prize for inventing a way to color photographs. After 3 years of hard work and constant study, Marie took her final exams in science. Only 2 women graduated that year. Marie was first in her whole class, ahead of the men. Now she was finished studying. Marie thought she would go home to Poland. She had promised her father to come back and take care of him. Then something lucky happened. She got a scholarship to stay another year. This time she would study math. Marie couldn't resist. Learning was the most satisfying thing she had ever done in her life. Why would she want to stop now? So that's chapter 2 and chapter 3, and I will see you on the next chapter. Bye!